Schaden macht klug, ja, das stimmt, aber man muss nicht jeden Fehler selbst machen. Aus den Erfahrungen anderer lernen ist immer eine gute Alternative und für Unternehmen eine preiswerte Investition. Sie hören den Podcast von Horizons Maritime Services. Mein Name ist Burkhard Müller, ich bin Kapitän und arbeite für das Beratungsunternehmen Horizons Maritime Services. In kurzen Folgen möchte ich mit Ihnen meine Erfahrungen im Risiko- und Krisenmanagement teilen, die Ihnen und Ihren Unternehmen helfen können, Schäden, Unfälle und Krisen zu vermeiden oder diese erfolgreich zu bewältigen, wenn sie unvermeidbar doch eingetreten sind. Für die heutige Ausgabe des Podcasts Krisenmanagement, Herausforderung und Chance habe ich einen außergewöhnlichen Mann gebeten, mir ein Interview zu geben. Es ist Jan Hedegard aus Schweden, Jahrgang 1944. Er lebt mit seiner Lebensgefährtin in der Nähe von Stockholm und er ist einen bemerkenswerten beruflichen Weg gegangen. Er ist Pilot. Er ist Kapitän, Master Mariner, und er ist Psychologe. Wir kennen uns seit mehr als 10 Jahren und ich habe unglaublich viel von ihm gelernt. Auch heute noch ist jedes Treffen mit ihm eine wertvolle Erfahrung. Jan trainiert seit über 20 Jahren Menschen in hochsensiblen Sicherheitsbereichen im Bereich der Krisenprävention. Er trainiert Besatzung von Kernkraftwerken, Piloten in Flugzeug-Cockpits, nautische Offiziere auf Kommando-Brücken von Schiffen und Ärzte in OP-Sälen. Dass es in Schweden keine nennenswerten Zwischenfälle in Kernkraftwerken gab, ist auch sein Verdienst. Themen dieses Interviews sind die Bedeutung der Psyche in Krisensituationen, die Wichtigkeit, dass man mental vorbereitet ist auf plötzliche Veränderung der Umgebungsbedingungen. Wir werden über den Gebrauch von Checklisten sprechen und über vieles mehr, was Training relevant, wichtig und nutzbringend für Menschen in sicherheitsrelevanten Prozessen macht. Dieses Interview werde ich natürlich in englischer Sprache führen und hier noch ein Hinweis für Hörer, die eventuell einige englische Fachbegriffe aus der Luftfahrt vielleicht nicht so gut kennen. Jan wird dort in seinen Beispielen einige dieser Begriffe verwenden. Zum einen ist das Hypoxia, auf Deutsch die Hypoxie. Das ist Sauerstoffmangel im Blut. Das kann passieren bei Fliegen in großen Höhen, wenn man keine Druckkabine hat. ILS steht für Instrument Landing System, also ein Instrumentenlandesystem. ILS Approach heißt nichts anderes, als dass man bei schlechter Sicht einen Flughafen anfliegt, wo man sich auf seine Instrumente verlassen muss. Und noch ein anderer Fachbegriff, Stall. Stall ist der Strömungsabriss an den Tragflächen durch zu geringe Geschwindigkeit oder bei einem zu starken Anstieg. Ein Stall ist einer der gefährlichsten Flugzustände, der in vielen Fällen unmittelbar zu einem Absturz eines Flugzeuges führt. Ja, soweit als kleine Einleitung. Also let's switch to English and let's go to Jan Hedegard. Well, I would like to start. I would like to welcome our listeners of this podcast episode in March 2021. And as I promised, as I announced, I have a really very good friend and a special guest from Sweden I have invited. And Jan is here with me, Jan Hedegard. And Jan, I thank you very much for your time. And even more, I have to thank you that you support me in this podcast, which is
it's not a scientific tutorial about things. It's more a sharing of experiences. And this is how I met you some 10 years ago when I was your pupil in one of your Train the Trainer courses. And it is inspiring people to do certain things and really to share experiences. And as I know you for quite some time, meanwhile, I know you have a vast amount of experience, and that's why it was the idea to invite you for this interview. And again, thanks for your time you take and to give your insight into this this topic of managing situations and how to react under pressure, how we take decisions in difficult circumstances, things like that. So Jan, again, very warm welcome here from Germany to Sweden. I hope you enjoy the same weather like we do. And Jan, please give us a little bit background for our listeners that they have a better idea of you.
Right, I'll start a bit into my life then. I'll leave out before the A-level. I was trained, maritime training was at the Naval Academy in Sweden. And I especially enjoyed the sailing ships, the tall ships. So that's, then I trained as a clinical psychologist, worked in prisons, mental hospitals, and even special prisons, security prisons. I learned a lot about human characteristics then. And then I got an employment in Denmark at Riise National Laboratories, which is actually Niels Bohr Institute, very famous. And I had the fortune of having Jens Rasmussen, a world famous man-machine expert, as my boss. So I stayed there for 4 years, and then I moved to England. Smart. So then I have, my background is a little bit of speciality is training crews of any kind in how to work together when the shit hits the fan. And but of course, even in normal circumstances. And I've trained mainly people within aviation because I have a background as a pilot. And of course, at sea, people, crews, both military and civilian, mostly civilian though. Nuclear power, 20 years of training crews in nuclear power. Offshore, onshore, medical team, trauma team, and so on. So I'm specializing in training crews and training instructors.
And let me jump in. And this is for me the very special combination you can offer, which is your experience as a person who is in this typical world of where we are much regulated, like shipping, like aviation, where we use checklists, where we prepare for certain situations. But on the other hand, you are also a psychologist. So you have looked into how people feel or what changes in people when they have to deal with unexpected situations. And is that something you use very often in your training? You use examples, share experiences?
Absolutely, every course. And one area I should add actually is accident and incident investigations. I was part of the aviation accident investigation board in Stockholm.
Yeah.
So, and took part in both military and investigations of both military and civilian aircraft. So, yes, to answer your question, yes, and I found it it gives a little bit of reality or realism to what we are talking about, and the best of all is it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Made up is true because it's part of my own experience or what I learned from reports.
Yeah.
And so, yes.
Yeah, and this is what I also learned from you, and this is when I was really encouraged by you to do this and to go the same route, share own experiences and ask questions to people how they would see a certain situation and how they would believe they would react in certain situations. And I believe this makes training relevant to people. If we don't talk about something, we share own experiences. And since you are an active pilot, and I can also share that to our listeners, we spent some time together flying on the South African continent. That was a great time where you were our pilot. And going back to your experience as airline pilot, were there situations where you personally felt threatened, where you felt highly stressed in your cockpit?
I have to think, and it takes a long time for a Swede to think. Maybe the big drama is not maybe relevant here, but I mean smaller things that I learned. I learned, but just one minor things which maybe have not bearing at all what we are talking about, but I realized the effects of hypoxia. Because most of the planes, I flew small taxi planes, 10 seaters and so on, without no pressurization. And I climbed once to 17,000 feet to top some very bad weather. This is close to illegal, but if I stay there more than half an hour, but it's gone now. It's a long time ago. And then I sat there for I was alone in the plane, and maybe 45 minutes. And then I started to descend, and I looked at my nails, like this, and you can see when you get hypoxia, they get blue at the bottom. Just, oh shit! So we had oxygen, so I got the oxygen mask down and put it on my face, and I took 3 breaths. And the whole instrument panel lit up. Oops, like that. Because I thought I had to look like this on the pit, because and that taught me about. Because then you're getting a bit close to unconsciousness and so on. But that's one thing. There are, what should I say? Well, I had to land a twin, the same type plane, on one engine, making an ILS approach in fairly shitty weather in Denmark, on the way from Stockholm to England, with icing as well. So, and suddenly I can see the manifold pressure on the left engine just come down like that, and this is an indication. And that taught me that the mental pressure from that, making a single engine ILS approach in bumpy weather with icing down to, it was about 300 feet, so it was 100 feet above minima, which is bloody close to ground, as you know. So, and that taught me that you have to stay fit. You have to be trained, practice this.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Is there anything else? I think I have to come back to you on that one and give it. I haven't had time to do that, I must say, for the time being. But I will give you, I mean, Africa, flying in Africa is an adventure in itself. It creates.
Yes, you are right. It was.
It creates emergencies and disruptions and whatever. And I have with me a toolbox. Oh, it's here. But anyway, it's a yellow toolbox that big.
Yeah.
I have to have that with me, otherwise I can't survive in the bush.
Yeah.
There's always something happening. Now I'm mentally prepared, but the first time is you get a little bit stunned, or what should I call a mechanic? That will take 3 days for him to come here by road, or maybe flown in, and so on. So I had those decisions. Now they are simple. I try to fix it myself as long as I can.
Yeah.
But I could come back to more examples.
Yeah. What I learned in my let's say in my previous 6-7 years, which I spent into safety training to maritime staff, to marine people, to captains, to deck officers, and one topic was always the value of checklists. And there were some mostly very experienced captains. They said, well, actually, I know my business and I don't need checklists for doing my business. And very often I had an own example, which I told them. And funny enough, I was also, this not as long as you do the flight business, but I had also for 10 years I had a private pilot license. And I did once an approach to a German airfield or airport where I made a mistake in the landing preparation. And the mistake I could not identify myself, but the result of that mistake was that I did not have enough power to adjust my altitude in the landing approach. And I had a high voltage line in front of me, which I needed to fly over, which based on the descent path I have already taken and the remaining altitude, it looked that I will not make it. So I needed the power urgently. And that created really high stress in me. And I suffered from something like empty head or frozen brain. And what I did was I took out the checklist again, and then I went through these items on the checklist, and then I found the mistake. And it was easy to correct. It was just a handling mistake. And I had the full power again. And then, I skipped the approach. I made a 360, and then I approached again, and I had a very safe landing. And I always use this example in my training. And I tell people, guys, you have to be prepared for situations like that if the conditions change suddenly, and you are not prepared, and you may end up in a situation that your cognitive capacity is limited, and you will not be able to think and take rational decisions as you would normally do, sitting somewhere in a nice office. And this helped me a lot to convince people to understand the use of checklists, especially emergency response checklists. How is that for you when you did the training? And you did much more training than I did for nuclear power plant staff and the like.
If you look at the curve of accidents and incidents in civil aviation,
Yeah.
28 when Lindbergh flew over the, or 27 or 28. Anyway, it was absolutely Lebensgefahr to fly to go as a passenger in the 50s. You can see the curve is, it looks like a ski slope.
Yeah.
And then three things were put in. New technology to make the approaches like ILS. CRM, crew resource management or bridge resource management. And also use of documentation. And here comes my answer to your question. There is a very famous research by an American doctor in hospitals all over the States. He introduced checklists for surgery. Just checklists. He said, you know, do that, point one, do that, do that, do that, do that. And please remove the towel you just put inside the stomach of a patient before you sew him up.
Yeah.
It has happened so many times that things are left in. Anyway, with only that, he decreased the number of deaths by close to 40%.
Yeah.
That's the only thing he did. He said it's compulsory to work as a surgeon, according to the, and that shows how important it is. When I started to flew in Africa, and I was trained in Sweden and the States, and I said, because I had to do a checkout with the instructor, so they could see that I haven't falsified my license. It was actually correct. So then we sat down in a little Cessna 172, I thought it was, and I said, sorry, where is the checklist? And the instructor looked at me and said, if you can't fly the aircraft without a checklist, you shouldn't fly at all. And I took my revenge on this guy because I worked for that company later on.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm going to make you to do 3 mistakes on this flight, because we were some flights we were 2 pilot, crew. And it was extremely easy. We just distract him a bit. And suddenly make a change in the plane. So he excluded one of the checklist items. So I said, well, what happened to change tank to the fullest tank? Oh, shit. Right. Could you have prevented this by having a checklist, which will delay you about 15 seconds? So it's really is an enormous important thing for me in nuclear power, because it's a blockaded machinery.
Yeah.
And even aircraft is okay. Yeah. Was that an answer? Sorry for that.
Yeah. Another question is, I learned that when I started to look into the training business, especially for decision making under stress, that pilots use short-term decision making strategies. And I was also very closely working with a few pilots and flight trainers from Deutsche Lufthansa, and what they are using, and he explained that to me, is this concept of 4-deck, where F stands for facts, O for options, R for risks, D for decision, E for execution, and Charlie, the C at the end, for check. And it made sense to me, and I also use that in my training courses. And is there any advice from your end, or is there also any special tool perhaps you use, or you train, or you advise people to use for decision making under stress, this kind of strategies?
Yes, and before I answer that question, just mention to you what is now compulsory in civil aviation all over the world, and it's a course called AUPT, actually built on the alpha, on the angle of attack of the aircraft.
Yeah,
that is compulsory.
Okay.
And so I trained pilots on the theoretical side of that, and then a friend of mine who is the owner of a training academy, he does the actual flying. So it might be a little bit ridiculous because the instructor, who is the student in this case, because we are training instructors in this upset prevention. And so on. So, and of course they know it's going to be some kind of suddenly the plane will be on his back in some way or the other. But they have said after us, when we are made of, we have checked it, what they think, and they have made them much more aware of, as you said before, they are more, they have less surprise time than if they hadn't been trained at all. And the thing that threatens it all is spontaneous, quick actions. Spontaneous, quick actions, premature actions. There is a famous Air France, I think it was a 380 or something, hitting in the middle of the Atlantic.
The Airbus crash.
Air France 900, I think it was. And that is a very good example of that, you can figure out. Because they didn't think, they worked on the indications, and the indications were wrong. But it's against the whole training that in order to gain speed, you can't climb. If you pitch up 25 degrees, sooner or later you will run out of speed.
Absolutely,
In a big airliner. So, but they were so shocked, and this was a fairly unexperienced pilot, because the captain was in the loo. So that's one thing. To return to your question, one golden rule is don't teach them too many of these
strategies or
whatever. Because then they mix them up. I have picked out a few of them and I introduce them. So maybe during a whole course, I have introduced 4, something like that. Depends a little bit on the course. But if you overload them with a lot of, what do you call them, acronyms, then they won't, because the brain will be so primitive when we are put under stress, and especially threats to your life. So the worst thing that could happen, and it mostly goes wrong, it's not very nice to have to say that, quick, unknown, complicated, life-threatening. If you introduce those 4 at once, there are very few. It was pure luck that they ended up not being killed. If I'm a little bit dramatic now. So.
This is.
For example, is Harrisburg in the nuclear power station in the States. TMI-2, the number 2 unit in 3 Mile Island. They are still digging out the the core at the bottom of the station of that. That was bloody close to another Chernobyl, or rather it was before Chernobyl. So 1979, I think, or 78 or 79. The crew were badly trained. The interface was bad. I mean, the man-machine interface was bad. They were highly stressed. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes from when they saw the thing until it was too late.
Yeah.
They had all their families living
around them,
around the whole plant, together with friends and whatever. So I have actually been there and interviewed them.
Oh,
and they said it was just dough up here.
Yeah.
Nothing really, couldn't think clearly. So that is the risk. And then we do, as you said, short term. We do something spontaneously, which is closest to our training. And that doesn't mean it's a good solution.
Yeah.
Normally, I would give it less than 50% that it is.
Yeah.
So the only thing is to practice and practice and practice and practice.
Yeah.
You know, the American lieutenant colonel in the Marine.
So you were with the lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, he is rather famous. I can send it to you. It's very useful advice to talk about. And he said that normally we say that we live up far above our normal performances or abilities when something goes wrong. No, we fall down to the fundamental level of training.
Yeah.
So you can't do anything when you're stressed and threatened to life for your life. The inventive part of the thinking is gone.
Yeah.
So it means that if you train them, then it's, I mean, you know how many seconds I have in a twin in the Navajo, for instance, we flew in Africa.
Yeah.
If I get an engine failure, suddenly on the right engine, there are pistons and oil and bits and pieces coming out like that. At the very moment I'm rotating, I'm up in a Navajo, it's about 75 to 80 knots.
Yeah.
If I continue climbing without doing anything, i.e. the gear is down, the right hand prop is not feathered and so on, everything. How many seconds does it take until the aircraft stalls?
I'm not an experienced pilot, but you are. Tell me, please.
They've done research on that. 5.1 seconds.
Which is.
And in that time, in that little period of time, I have to say full power, gear up, flaps up, identify dead foot, dead engine, speed, feather, what am I saying? Identify, check that I have identified properly, feather the right engine by pulling the prop thingy back, bank towards the live engine and climb out 5 seconds.
Yeah.
If I don't know that by heart, then I'm dead together with if it happens. So that shows the importance of drill training if you want to insert
absolutely.
training. So So in this upset prevention recovery training in aviation, then, that's what we're teaching. So they should know. Now there's a technical aspect of it to stall and spins and so on. It's no fun to have an Airbus 380 spinning. That's not fun, I think.
Imagine. Yes.
I have never experienced, but you have to know by heart. So every time I line up with if I fly a twin, then comes football, flaps up, identify, dead foot, dead engine, verify, feather, and so on. I do this and maybe you saw that when I was talking to myself, and maybe you thought, oh, Jan is getting old now. He's talking to himself.
No. Well, actually, it's really good to hear that from you, because we have used this concept also in the training for Marine officers. So when we do emergency response training on the bridge, we also look into the initial actions, and I always push people to tell them you have, or at least you try to memorize the initial actions. It's not much, however, it can save tremendous time, and it can save perhaps lives if you are able to initiate the initial actions which are needed for an emergency by heart, and you just use the checklist to double check. So, we have these two concepts of using a checklist. We use it as a read and do checklist, or as a do and read checklist. And I believe in an airplane cockpit, it's even more important, because things happen so quickly, and the time you have to recover from a life-threatening situation is much shorter than we have it on ships. But still, the concept of training people to understand that we have to prepare for the unexpected, this is, I believe, absolutely the same. And I learned a lot of this concept, this approach, how to make training relevant to people, how to make it valuable for them. I learned that from you. And again, I thank you very much for that. And the last question I would like to ask you for today is, this is also something which is unfortunate for human mankind. But unfortunately, we only learn from bad mistakes, or in other words, we learn from big disasters to make change and to instigate new procedures, new law, new approach to the business. And of course, in the shipping world, we talk about disasters like Titanic, like the ferry Estonia, and the most recent one, the cruise ship Costa Concordia, where shortcomings in training were highlighted, and also a lot of other things which then are put high on the agenda of the legislators for training, for operational people, things like that. Is there any big disaster in any kind of the business you are involved, like nuclear power plant business, aviation, medical trauma teams, where you believe this is one of the impact which has instigated a lot of change in that area of business?
Yes, I think it has. And it started, as you know, in aviation.
Yeah.
With the CRM, and then it became BRM and MRM and all RMs they can think of.
Yeah.
And that has drastically lowered human errors, drastically.
Yeah.
I would like to comment a bit, go back to one of your questions, because this has bearing to what you asked now. You asked whether there is something that we can teach the crews when it comes to just decision making in this upset prevention, for instance, recovery training. And during the 20 years I've trained people in Swedish nuclear power and Russian actually, and South African down there. I tried to introduce, and they have said it was a good thing actually, 3 types of decision making depending on the time.
Okay.
And decision making by definition, then you don't know the action. You don't know what to do.
Mm.
Because if you know the action, then it's solution application is called. You just apply a known solution. And then introduced time on those points. If it's an immediate one,
yeah,
you have to do something within 10 seconds or something else. Then you make a decision yourself as the boss, as the captain, as whatever.
Yeah.
And then nobody should intervene. Of course, if it's completely bonkers, but the principle is that don't. You evaluate it afterwards.
Yeah.
The second type is you got maybe a minute. And here comes this, and I have incidents in Swedish nuclear power that can prove this, is we call that decision with consultation.
Okay. Yeah.
So you consult the crew. So you
yeah.
say, look, we have a fire there, and come on, I need action suggestions.
Yeah.
And then as the captain or officer in charge or whatever, then you evaluate those quickly. And then, because that we have noticed increases the quality of the decision tremendously. It's about 5 times better normally. Yeah. And then so the first one is decision making without consultation.
Yeah.
You in principle, you just give an order.
Mm-hmm.
Second one with consultation, just I would like action suggestions.
Yeah.
Thinking. That was a good one. He said that was a good one. So,
yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're going to do. And then comes the order.
Yeah.
The third type is when you have a lot of time, preferably more than half an hour.
Mm.
Then you can use a technique called decision making in groups.
Yeah.
And that is according to a checklist.
Yeah.
It's very simple. You define it, the situation. You ask for suggestions. You write the suggestions down. All people around you, and then you scrutinize these or evaluate these suggestions by positive and negative.
Yeah.
If we do this, what bad could happen? If we do that, what positive could happen? Then you easily see we should scrap this one.
Yeah.
Then you so say, okay, you write down preferably if you have a board, so they know what to do if it's a long list of things you've done. You say, ladies and gentlemen, this is what you're going to do. You do that, you do that, you do that, you do that. Paragraph A, you do B, you do C, myself, I do D. And that increases. I have introduced some nasty, bloody scenarios to them with built-in unknown traps.
Yeah.
And I have, apart from once, I think, during all these years, 30 years or whatever it is, I have never got a bad decision out of decision making in groups.
Yeah.
It's bloody impressive by a group that can do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that really confirms that what I believe is actually highly important. If you are somewhere in an operational control center and you are dealing with an emergency where one has to take the decision, who is the boss, the captain, the group leader, whoever, however, also make best use of his team around him, also in decision making. And as you just described, it can be even done in very short time. And I experienced that when I was working in this shipping company and I was the responsible person for crisis management in the shore emergency response center. I was also always appreciating and I really learned that how to use it, the support of a team around you. And I think this is something we can't stress enough in terms of how important relevant training is. Because first of all, you have to know that these concepts are there, how we as human, as persons, how we react to stress, to pressure, to time pressure, to decision-making pressure, to life-threatening situations. We have to understand that we have to use tools which helping us in these situations, and how to use them, it's a matter of training. And as you say, at the end, under extremely high pressure, our cognitive performance goes back to the basic level of training. Then we do what we have trained or we have been trained in. And if this is still there, we have a base where we can use, that we can work from, and we make progress in managing situations. And yeah, this is something I also told my listeners in the previous episodes of podcast, how we should set up a good crisis management response organization in companies, in administrations. And the current situation where we are now under this coronavirus pandemic worldwide, it indicates that in some areas we were prepared, or countries were prepared, in others not so well, and then the outcome is of course much different. And yeah, this indicates that training and making people understanding, as you did it with me, and I try to convey what I have learned and what I have experienced, to convey that to other people, which I also use in this more modern technology format, in form of a podcast. And this is, in my mind, it's so highly valuable that we share what we have learned. And that's why it was really nice to talk to you. I would like to continue this for the next hours, but we have agreed to keep a limit on that. And Jan, thanks for your time. And I would try to put it all together, and we'll broadcast it. We did it.
We did, right? Maybe that is, that is a trick by big famous what do you call it, conductors or whatever. They say, well, let's practice, and then there's the real thing. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
No, again, thanks a lot.
Well, let's make a short summary. What should be the takeaways of this interview with Jan Hedegard? I believe he mentioned, and he really stressed, how important it is to be mentally prepared. If you are not prepared, you feel highly stressed if you are exposed to a situation for the first time. If you are trained, if you can prepare, then the level of stress will be much less. So this is really one of the key takeaways that you can rely on how to manage situations successfully if you are prepared by training. Second, introduction of checklists. Just his example, reducing deadly complications in hospitals, in vital surgery on the human body, accounts for 40% less deadly complications just by introducing checklists for these operations. And third, the importance of understanding how to take decisions. He uses in his training short-term decision strategies, but also he trains his participants in understanding you have to be able to take short, quick decisions. However, you also have to take efforts. You have to make use of your team around you. That is what he described as decision-making with consultation or decision-making in groups. So overall, I believe his advice he has given in this 45 minutes interview is something which we really can use to understand, to be prepared for crisis situations and how to manage them.
So, das war's für heute. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören. Wenn es Ihnen gefallen hat und die Informationen hilfreich für Sie waren, sagen Sie es gern weiter und hören Sie wieder rein zur nächsten Folge in 4 Wochen. Haben Sie Fragen, Kritiken oder Hinweise, schicken Sie mir bitte eine E-Mail an podcast@krisenfachmann.de. Weitere Informationen finden Sie auf meiner Internetseite www.krisenfachmann.de. Also bis zum nächsten Mal, auf Wiederhören, Ihr